Good afternoon. I'm Deborah Garlick from Henpicked Menopause in the Workplace, and welcome to today's session. Now, today's session is all about fatigue. So if you're suddenly finding yourself struggling with fatigue, don't know what to do about it, don't know what's going on, and most importantly, what you can do about it, then you're in the right place. And I'm delighted today to introduce Jackie Lynch, registered nutritional therapist, back with us again. So welcome, Jackie.
Thanks, Deborah. It's great to be here again.
And can you tell us more about fatigue? Because I know when we talked about this last week, it was Friday, it was the end of the week, I was feeling quite shattered, but then again, it was at the end of a work week. But there's different types of fatigue, aren't there?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's a bit of a fatigue epidemic really going on when you think that 1 in 5 GP appointments relate to low energy and fatigue. And there's no actual formal diagnosis as such of fatigue. It's a subjective description for the way you're feeling. Now, obviously, if you've got persistent tiredness that's unrelieved by rest, then you really do need to go and see a doctor, because it could be the sign of an underlying medical condition, for example, underactive thyroid. And interestingly, the symptoms of underactive thyroid are very similar to menopause symptoms. So fatigue, weight gain, anxiety, for example. So it's easy to sort of assume it might be something else. So always worth going to check these things out as a very first step.
Thank you, Jackie. And you say menopause is, that's something that we hear about a lot from women, saying fatigue was a really big problem for them during menopause.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, any kind of enormous hormonal change is going to be exhausting. Think of teenagers. Anybody who has either got teenage children or who knows teenagers will know how much they sleep. They're sleeping all the time, and we're not, mainly because we're far too busy rushing around. But they've got it right, really, because that sleep is helping their brain to rewire and all the hormones to settle down. We're usually far too busy, A, looking after everybody else, and B, doing the jobs and juggling all the myriad things, which means that, with menopause and with perimenopause can come quite a lot of fatigue. But of course, on top of that, there could be any number of reasons why you're tired.
It's interesting you say that the teenagers have got it right, making sure, not being able to get them out of bed. That's not something that we have the benefit of during menopause, is it? So many of us really struggle to get good quality sleep. So it's a double whammy.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, insomnia is always going to make you feel tired. So that's a bit of a given already. But also worth remembering that assuming there's no medical condition at the root of your fatigue, chances are diet and lifestyle can make a huge difference. And this is where what you were saying earlier is so relevant, because I think the first thing we need to do is work out what kind of fatigue is it? Is it loss of stamina or physical weakness? Is it lack of mental energy, poor concentration, memory, or focus? Is it the highs and lows, the peaks and troughs of energy? Or do you just feel tired all the blooming time? What's going on there? Because each of those different ones could relate to different nutrients.
That's very interesting, because when we say fatigue, we tend to use it as a broad spectrum word, don't we? But it can be different for different individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the most common thing that women tend to assume is that, I'm fatigued, it must be low iron, rush off and take some iron tablets. We need to be slightly careful about that, because without the diagnosis of a blood test, if you take iron tablets when you don't actually need them, you can have a build-up in the tissues, which can, over time lead to some nasty issues and toxicity, which you don't want. So the first thing to do always is to check things. But anemia, iron deficiency anemia, is quite common for women during the perimenopause, because, of course, a lot of women, rather than having lighter periods and fewer periods, have much heavier and more frequent periods. So where iron might not have been an issue before, suddenly it might be. So you might need to be thinking about getting more iron in your diet.
Yes, that makes sense, doesn't it? That anemia can happen during this time. But what actually causes these, when your energy is on the carpet, what is it that's actually going on in our bodies that causes our energy to completely dissipate?
Great question. Well, I think first of all, let's think about the biochemistry of energy. Now, the energy production process in the body is a really complicated chain reaction. And for each, the links in the chain, if you like, are different nutrients. And so if you're low in any of those nutrients, then the catalyst to move to the next part of the chain reaction to produce the energy simply won't happen. So let's start with magnesium, which I know you've heard me talk a lot about before. I really think it's every menopausal woman's best friend. Now, magnesium does loads of great stuff, but in terms of energy, it's our ignition key. So every single enzymatic reaction in the body as part of this chain reaction has an absolute requirement for magnesium. So without magnesium, you're not going to get off the starting blocks. So this is the one where you just feel sort of permanently tired and you're just operating on sheer willpower. In my experience, a lot of the time, that's magnesium.
And before, whenever you're talking to us about what we should be getting into our diet, I guess there's two different ways of doing that, isn't there? There are supplements, but there's also eating the right diet. Now I'm thinking Jackie's going to tell me to eat more broccoli again, which actually, whenever I'm really tired, the first thing I reach for is chocolate.
Yeah. Well, of course, that's all about the body's reaction to emergency and stress. Because if you're particularly prone to the highs and lows of energy, then that's going to come down to blood sugar. Every time your blood sugar crashes, your body releases stress hormones. And if your stress hormones have come out, then they want to take action. They want to take emergency action because they believe they are there to save your life. You know, we're still programmed genetically for about 10,000 years ago. So if you haven't got sugar in your blood, if your blood sugar's low, that's a problem because technically sugar is our primary source of energy. So the stress hormones will immediately take action. And one of the things they'll do is generate the powerful cravings for that quick fix that your body instinctively knows will give you what you need, which is, the sugary food, the chocolate, a lot of carbohydrates. So suddenly the big baguette sandwich at lunch instead of the salad you promised yourself because your blood sugar's crashed. Or it might be a cup of coffee, or it might be a glass of wine. It can depend on the time of day as to what you might crave. But one of the big tricks for energy, if you are prone to sugar cravings and you rely on sugar or caffeine to keep you going, is to keep your blood sugar nice and stable, because without the crashes, you don't get that extra hormone surge, which is likely to drive the sugar cravings.
Right. Okay. So getting in good habits is almost like building up into an upward spiral rather than the downward spiral.
Well, it's, you don't want it too high either, because that's going to send you hyper. It's about staying in the middle. And the trick with that is twofold. It's fiber, which is complex carbohydrate. So brown stuff, brown bread, brown rice, brown pasta. Simple carbohydrate, you need to be avoiding, refined carbohydrate, white stuff. Other good sources of fiber will be vegetables, fruits with an edible skin. And then you match that with protein, because protein is hard to digest. It slows down the release of the carbohydrate even further, really keeps you going for longer. So if you've got that fabulous combination of protein and fiber with your meals and your snacks, there isn't the chance for your blood sugar to crash. So you're not going to be prone to the craving and the reliance on sugar or caffeine for energy.
That's great advice then, Jackie. So how do I get into those good habits? I know I followed at the beginning of this year how many pieces of fruit and vegetable did you get me eating a day?
Yeah, 40 over the course of a week. 40 different ones.
I thought it was impossible, but actually it really did work. So how do you start on this journey?
Well, what do they say? The longest journey starts with a single step. And I think it's about getting breakfast right. Because if you don't get breakfast right, once you're on the blood sugar seesaw with the highs and lows, there's no chance. It's really hard to get off because your hormones are determining your food choices, not your brain. And we midlife women know that in a battle with the hormones, they are always going to win. So get your breakfast right. Think about, okay, well, if you're a toast woman, fine, but make it wholemeal toast. And then not Marmite or honey or jam, because there's not an ounce of protein in that. Put some unsweetened nut butter, maybe peanut butter or some cottage cheese or an egg, something that's got lots of protein in. And then already you're starting the day nice and carefully. I'm not saying you can't have your tea or coffee. You probably really want that in the morning, but maybe don't have that as well as a great big glass of orange juice, because the orange juice is super high in sugar, even if it's freshly squeezed. There's a lot of sugar going on there. So just be thinking carefully about perhaps the caffeine in moderation, and then really getting the food side of breakfast right, so that by the time you move to your next meal, you're hungry but not desperate. That's the trick. It's the desperation which proves the hormones are now out and about and causing you trouble. If you're hungry, your brain can still say sensibly, oh, I'll have that nice salad, and you know that you're okay with it.
Thank you, Jackie. And I know one of the things I particularly loved in your book, The Happy Menopause, were the swaps. And I think everybody in our team knows full well that you swapped my cheesy Wotsits for something that was going to do me a little bit more good. But it makes sense. You don't necessarily have to do it all in one go.
No, absolutely. It's all about taking your time and doing it right. You're getting your ducks in a row. We're busy people. We've got loads going on. So the trick is to really just make sure that you've done the planning, you've got the food in the house, you've got the right stuff in. When you're busy, it's much easier to grab it.
Right. Okay. So breakfast, lunch, dinner, always thinking about protein, always thinking about those fiber elements.
Yeah, that's getting the basics right. And then the great thing about that, particularly if you're eating lots of vegetables, is suddenly you're going to be bringing in a lot of the energy-friendly nutrients. Because remember the links in the chain reaction I talked about? B vitamins is one of those. B vitamins really are the catalyst nutrients that they're like our spark plugs. They keep the energy going nice and smoothly as we motor along. So if you're low in B vitamins, that's going to be a problem. And you need to think about why you might be if you're having a good balanced diet. Are you drinking too much alcohol? Because alcohol dramatically depletes B vitamins. Are you boiling your vegetables to glory? Because B vitamins are water soluble and you can lose up to 40% if you drain the sort of green water down the sink. So we need to be thinking about what we're doing and how we're doing it, as well as what we're eating.
That's great advice. And so it's not a good time for these fad diets then? They don't help with the energy.
No, well, they're not going to help. And I mean, anyone who's struggling with issues around things like chronic fatigue or the long COVID, which is basically post-viral fatigue, it's not the time to be removing major food groups from your diet, because your body needs that stuff. And you mentioned supplements earlier, and while supplements can be very helpful, they are just that, a supplement. And I think it's important to get the basics of your diet right first, because that's a form that the body really recognizes, because it's in Mother Nature's form. And the great thing about food, if you pick a piece of fruit or a vegetable, it doesn't just have vitamin C in it or just magnesium. It's got a whole range of different vitamins and minerals which work in synergy together. And that's always going to be much more beneficial for your body and much more effective than just stuffing yourself with, let's say, single zinc supplements because you've read somewhere that they're good for energy.
Right. Okay. So get the diet right first. Is there still room for supplements? Because some are harder for us to get the right level than others, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not saying don't take them, but I just don't think I think, supplements can't solve a bad diet, I suppose, is what I'm saying. What they can do is really support what you're already doing to get yourself the right kind of diet. And I think a good quality multivitamin and mineral for most of us is a really good shout, because what you've got there is something that slightly mimics Mother Nature with a bit of everything in. And then if you need more support from there, you could look at getting specialist advice. And one of the reasons why that's going to be really helpful energy-wise is because nutrient absorption can be a big deal. I mean, a lot of women in midlife start to struggle with issues around indigestion, bloating, discomfort, constipation. And when your digestion's all over the place, even if you're eating the best diet in the world, you won't be absorbing all those lovely nutrients. So sometimes a multivitamin on top of that could be really helpful.
A multivitamin containing which, because if you flip to the back of the box, which of the nutrients would you be particularly looking for? You said magnesium, the B ones.
Any good multi is going to contain all the usual suspects. It will have, vitamin A, B, all the Bs. It will have C, it will have D, it will probably have K. It'll have E. I missed out E. That's the skin one, everyone. We don't want to forget that. And it will have selection of the minerals as well. So it will have magnesium, it will have things like selenium and manganese, and all these things that work together to support energy levels. Most multis don't have iron in as well, because if it's a general multivitamin and mineral, for example, a man might not need to be taking iron every day. So you'd need to be looking, if you think you might need iron, at something that's specifically for women. And then, of course, for women who are over 50, most multivitamins and minerals don't contain iron at all because they've stopped menstruating. And again, don't need that top up in iron and could be doing more harm than good. So usually iron supplementation is separate to the multivitamin. But as I mentioned right at the beginning, the smart move is to go and get a blood test. And the good thing about blood tests is you can get other blood tests as well, because although lack of energy, weakness, headaches, anxiety are classic symptoms of iron deficiency, they're also classic symptoms of vitamin B12 deficiency, which can also lead to issues around memory and concentration. So another blood test could really help with that. Or folate, which is known as folic acid in the synthetic form in a multivitamin. Again, that plays a big role in red blood cell production. If your red blood cells are low, then your body can't transport the oxygen around the body. And basically, it's oxygen that we use to make energy. The body takes the food that we eat, combines it with oxygen, and produces energy molecules.
That's fascinating. So where could you get those blood tests from? If you're really struggling with fatigue, is it something that your doctor would do for you?
Absolutely. The doctor's always got to be the first port of call in any case. And it's on the standard rostrum of tests they would do. If you rolled up to the GP and said, I am just tired all the time, I'm feeling dreadful, they would check your iron, they would check your vitamin B12, they'd check your folate, and they'd almost certainly check your thyroid as well, because it's all part of the same blood test that they'd look at.
Thank you, Jackie. And one thing that you did mention there was alcohol and caffeine. And I know one of the things we love about you is you're so sensible. You're not saying cut it out altogether, are you?
In principle, no. How tired are you, I suppose, is the question. Sometimes, a good month off can give our body a bit of a break. But by and large, we just need to make sure we're not building it up, because alcohol depletes, as I've said, B vitamins, but also zinc, magnesium, vitamin C, all the things that the body uses to produce energy. So have you started to get into little habits where you're having a glass or two of wine a night? All very civilized, not binge drinking, not the problem you might think. But if you're a little bit more sensitive, which as we go through the menopause we are, it's more likely that these are going to be depleting your nutrients, affecting your ability to absorb, certainly affecting your sleep, because alcohol, it's a powerful stimulant. So it's going to be disrupting sleep as well. So if that's an issue for you, perhaps start to think about easing back, maybe have 3 consecutive alcohol-free days a week. I say consecutive because that will give your liver time to do stuff. Now, the liver does loads of jobs. We think of it as the chemical factory and the detox factory, which is one of its big jobs for sure. But it's got, hundreds of jobs. And one of those is energy metabolism. So if you are keeping it busy because you're constantly stuffing it with alcohol and toxins and caffeine and goodness knows what, then it hasn't got time to produce energy. So it can become, quite sluggish, and so can you. So that the consecutive notion of 3 days off is really good, because it's a bit like you dealing with your inbox, your email inbox. If you have sort of 3 days off and just focus on what's there, you can catch up with all your jobs. So that's what the liver's trying to do.
True. Can I just ask you about food sensitivities? Because you mentioned about bloating, but are we more likely to experience food sensitivities during our menopause?
Clinically, I have observed that. I've noticed that, women come to see me and suddenly they are finding that certain foods are just making them tired or bloated. And I think a couple of the key culprits that I see, it can be anything. It's perfectly possible to be intolerant or allergic to different things, to anything. But the common suspects in my experience tend to be wheat or dairy. both of those are highly disruptive to the gut anyway. They contain compounds that are what's known as high FODMAP, which are natural irritants for the gut, nothing to do with the immune system and the sensitivity. They're just hard work. In the same way as beans, most people know that beans make them a bit windy. That's because they're high FODMAP. They're doing great work when you eat them, but my goodness, you can sometimes feel it. And quite often as we become a bit more sensitive, because, there are estrogen receptors all over the body and the gut is no exception. So the gut might not be working as well as it could be. So suddenly, perhaps you're not generating the same level of beneficial bacteria. And the beneficial bacteria in our gut doesn't just support digestion. It also supports our immune function and keeps it nicely tuned, because about sort of 70 to 80% of our immune cells are in the gut wall. They rely on the beneficial bacteria to work well. So if there isn't enough of that, you might suddenly find yourself with abnormal antibody reactions, which of course is what a food sensitivity is. And you might find that easing back from things like wheat, if you find that bread is making you feel really sluggish, well, just come off bread for a bit and see what happens. Or if you find that when you're drinking large amounts of milk or having it with your cereal, again, you're feeling really tired and sluggish and not great. Well, swap that, try something different and just see how you go.
That's fascinating. And I'm going to invite Sally, the training director from Henpicked Menopause in the Workplace, to join us. What were the questions, Sally, during that session?
Yeah, so thank you very much. We've had lots of questions and do keep them coming through. So we've had quite a few questions in particular around magnesium. So in terms of, first of all, what foods have magnesium in them to be able to take it in our diets?
Great. Well, leafy green vegetables. So things like spinach, rocket, kale, watercress, cabbage, and I'm going to chuck broccoli in there, although it's not technically leafy. Good couple of handfuls of those leafy greens every day in your diet would give you a nice magnesium boost. And another way to go would be whole grains. Brown rice in particular is an excellent source of magnesium. And for those of you who aren't fans of leafy greens, obviously I should say go and eat them anyway. But if you're not, then you can cheat and have an Epsom salts bath, because that's magnesium sulfate. 2 or 3 handfuls in the bath, soak for about 20 minutes, or a foot bath would work just as well if you're getting hot flushes and don't fancy a bath. The magnesium will absorb through the skin, and that can also help.
Fantastic. And people have asked how much you should have on a daily basis, and can you have too much magnesium?
Well, you can have too much of anything, although I have to say probably magnesium is one of the friendlier ones if you're having a lot of it. With anything that you're taking separately, you need to be checking in with your doctor if you've got a medical condition or if you're taking any medication. Because a number of nutrients, they're powerful things, they can interact with medication. So, for example, magnesium acts as a natural blood pressure lowerer, which is great. But if you're already on blood pressure medication, you might end up with dizzy spells or risk falling or fainting, which we wouldn't really want. So you need to sort of check that out first. Always respect the dosage on the label, because the form of magnesium that it comes in, there are different forms. You can get citrate, sulfate, picolinate, glycinate, etc. So look at the forms, because look at the dosage on the label, because they will have calculated it carefully for the level of absorption that's available in that product. By and large, we should happily be able to take up to 400 milligrams. You can go quite far with magnesium. It's a good one. But nevertheless, you need to also be listening to your body, see how you're feeling. If you don't feel good on something, then you don't do it. But always, as I say, respect the dosage. More is not necessarily better with these things, because minerals in particular work in opposition to each other. So, for example, zinc and copper. If you have loads of zinc, because you've read that it's great for the immune system, which it is, if you have loads of it in supplement form, not food form, but supplement form, then that can knock out the balance of copper, which works in a delicate partnership with zinc. And if you're low in copper, that creates a form of anemia. So once again, you'll suddenly feel very tired. So important to respect these things and be careful with them.
Fantastic, thank you. We also had a question around sleep. Because you were talking about teenagers have it right in terms of the amount of sleep they have, and just wondering if there's any advice on what is the right amount of sleep, or what should people be aiming for around menopause?
Well, it's tricky, isn't it? We're all different. So we can't say there's a particular amount, because some people function very well on 6 hours and others function can't function with less than 8. So you probably already know, by the time we've got to our age, we kind of know where we are on that scale, even if we're not admitting it to ourselves. I think the big thing is think about getting to bed early, because there's lots of research around the 4 golden hours of sleep, which is between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., where the most restorative functions go on, because sleep isn't just about rest. There's a whole load of restorative and healing processes that go on all over the body. So particularly if you're recovering from illness or injury, but the brain in particular goes through a self-cleaning process overnight, but in particular during that 4 golden hours. And there's no point saying, oh, well, I'll go to bed at midnight and my 4 golden hours can be till 4, because it doesn't work that way. Our body clock is very clear about what we should be doing. Whether or not we do it is another matter. But if you can get yourself to bed and asleep by about 10:30, then you're going to get better quality sleep in those early hours, which is going to really help.
Fantastic, thank you. And there is a question around what foods are good during menopause. If you could just recap the key areas that you think people should be focusing on eating during menopause that would support people, not just with fatigue, but in general.
Okay, well, what I said about protein and fibre is super important, because blood sugar balance is key. Remember I said that when your blood sugar crashes, out come the stress hormones. Well, as well as generating all the cravings, they will also disrupt your body's ability to produce estrogen. And post-menopause, there is a backup plan, which is our adrenal glands. And they produce a weak form of estrogen to keep us going. But they also produce a stress hormone. So if you're very busy and stressed and your blood sugar is constantly crashing, then there is going to be no space for your body to produce the estrogen you need. So for me, blood sugar balance, that protein fiber combo, is really nutrition 101. Over and above that, because you're probably going to be eating loads of vegetables as part of blood sugar balance, that ticks a lot of the boxes already. But you might want to look at things like phytoestrogens, which are plant compounds that mimic the action of estrogen in the body. And you'll find that in things like fermented soya, so miso, natto, tempeh, fermented tofu, or in compounds called lignans, which you'll find particularly in flaxseed. So a good tablespoon or 2 of ground flaxseed in your cereal or smoothie every morning could really help with issues around hot flushes and regulating hormone balance generally. And then other plant proteins like pulses, chickpeas, lentils, and so on are also relatively good sources of phytoestrogens.
Fantastic, thank you, that's really great. And someone's just come back to sleep and just asked about naps and whether we should have naps in the day, whether we think they're a good thing for the body, or what would
That's a really interesting one. You know, on my podcast recently, I interviewed a circadian neuroscientist who was a specialist in sleep, and he was saying that naps are great, but you need to be careful. You need to be careful about when you have them. Don't have them too late in the day, because they can then start to eat into your body's ability to want to go to sleep later. And he also said that keep them short. You know, a short 45-minute nap is going to be great. But if you start to have a really lengthy lapse, you're going to go into your sort of deep sleep. You're going to feel dreadful when you wake up. And ultimately, it's going to disrupt your body clock.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think, have we covered all of the questions there, Sally?
Yeah, I think the other one was just really around blood tests. I know you mentioned around testing for thyroid and iron and testing in general. Someone mentioned around vitamin D, whether that's, again, something that should be tested.
Yeah, absolutely. The minute you started saying that, I thought, I haven't even mentioned vitamin D. Yes, absolutely. And that, again, is one of the ones that's on the roster. So there's no need to worry. It's not going to be an awkward one you have to negotiate with your GP. Because, yes, low levels of vitamin D can really affect us, particularly during the winter, because vitamin D is fat soluble. So we store it and build it up over the summer with our exposure to whatever sunlight there is, which frankly this year wasn't much in the UK. And then you run out of it. And that's what often can lead to issues around, you know, seasonal affective disorder, fatigue, the winter blues, and so on. So yes, I'd absolutely look at getting that tested.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you very much, Sally, and thank you, Jackie. Lots and lots of advice there. Would you summarise it in any particular way?
I think keep it simple. Keep it simple. Do protein and fibre. If you don't want to think about anything else or worry about the names of different nutrients, just eat, you know, loads of vegetables. Think of your plate as a quarter protein with a fist's worth of protein, a quarter starch, you know, brown rice, let's say, half of it's vegetables. And that way you're going to get the balance right without having to think too hard, because we're busy women. We haven't got time to be worrying about this stuff.
Fabulous. And of course, a multivitamin. And I think one tip from me is this fabulous book, The Happy Menopause. You mentioned your podcast earlier, which is amazing and award-winning, actually. I know that it's been nominated for lots of different things. So that is a good book to get. But the other one is Var Broom, the 10-day energy diet.
Yes.
Which is yours as well, of course, Jackie. So I'm sure there'll be lots of other tips in there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're still sort of wondering quite what kind of energy you're struggling with, I've got the book starts out with a whole load of quizzes. You can find out exactly which form of energy might be the issue and go straight to have a look at that.
That's wonderful. So thank you very much, Jackie Lynch, and of course, Sally Leach. And thank you very much for joining us today. Look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks, Deborah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.